Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacalyn. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacalyn at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Our show today is the United Kitchens, and joining me for this special show is our celebrity chef and certified nutritionist, Ricki Mckenna. Let's welcome her. Hi, Ricki.
Hi, Dr. Jacalyn. Good morning or afternoon or evening to everyone else. Welcome.
It's nice to see you because we couldn't have this show without you because there's no other kitchen.
We will have a guest on the 20th.
Fantastic. Well, it's always a delight to see you, and I know you're whipping up something really amazing. For people who are joining us for the first time, we do have 2 new radio channels and people are tuning in. I'd love to have you share a little bit about your background and your passion with food.
Thank you. Well, welcome to my kitchen. This is Ricki's kitchen, and that's part of me. This is my comfort room. This is where I find my pleasure, my fun, my creativity is expressed through here, through cooking, and I meditate as I cook. So it kind of encompasses a lot of my life. I started on this journey way back with my children, of course, and found out that fish sticks were not the greatest things to feed them. So I decided to go to school, and I did graduate from nutrition and interesting, very, very interesting school with a degree in nutrition. I am certified in 1999, so I've been doing this for a long time. And as most of us know, things in nutrition change almost daily. So I've kept up my education with the years as they go by. I've worked for families, I've worked for individuals. I've worked for corporations such as United Healthcare and the American Diabetes Association, done work with them as well as other corporations and smaller companies, as well as the individuals and children. And so my education kind of runs the gap of working with people and dealing with food. And if there's nothing else that I have learned in all these 22 plus years, is that everybody has to eat. So food is extremely important. And the bottom line with food and nutrition is that food is the absolute key to your health. So that's a little bit about me. Now I'm in Houston, Texas. I've just completed a book. And in the way of speaking to food, I've said, yes, you can eat well and eat right. And it is on Amazon. You'll find it on Amazon in both paperback and an ebook. And I've also just created a spiral version. So that's the easy one to open and lay on your counter when you have a recipe to look at. And that's available through me at rickiskitchen.net. And so with that, I think we'll get started today. I love to do intuitive cooking, and that's what I teach. So what we're going to do is using our intuition as far as ingredients, what goes into something, because my philosophy is, to a point, if it smells good, it can go, especially in something like a soup. And we're going to make a really simple and really delicious soup today. It's Austrian green bean soup, and it contains few simple ingredients. We have the usual butter, not olive oil though, and garlic, which we'll start chopping at this moment, because that's the first thing to go in the pan. And it also has mushrooms, of course, and the green beans, of course. And this soup has barley, which makes it a very hearty and yet good soup to eat all year round, because it is, even with the barley in it, it's very light. Now, my thoughts, especially from the nutrition end of things, when I'm creating something like this that has barley, which is a gluten-containing grain, we can replace the barley with either rice or with something like quinoa, or a gluten-free orzo, something small that's small on the palate, and it's little bite-sized pieces. Which is the barley. It won't be quite as thick, but that's the difference in some of the soups. And of course, if you have a problem with gluten, then it's very important to consider that. I do work with allergies and with people with allergies and food sensitivities, and there is a difference between a food sensitivity and an allergy. So I take that into consideration. So this soup starts in a skillet. And I have 4 tablespoons of butter in here, and the recipe actually calls for 6, into which we will put our onions, celery, and the garlic. That is, if I can cut through the butter. I thought I softened it. And since I use the European butter, you take about 1 centimeter wide of the 2 pieces, if you can see this. And that's about 2 tablespoons. Sometimes the butter packages are marked in tablespoons, so you could look for that. But we're going to let the butter start to warm up. And in the meantime, I've got my garlic chopped up, and I chopped it up fairly fine. You can use a garlic press if you like and mince it, or you can use a knife and chop it up carefully, leaving your fingers intact, we hope. Actually, I'm going to take the garlic and place it in the pan because the butter is beginning to melt. And we'll have a look at that up a little bit closer shortly. Meantime, I'm going to cut my onion. And I've got a medium-sized yellow onion, which I'm going to cut in half first. And then start chopping it. It calls for chopping it fine, but that's, again, up to you. You can be very precise with things like baking and recipes that call for absolute ingredients and absolute measurements of ingredients. But when it comes to a soup, we're creating something that's for your family or for you and your friends, for all of the above. So the precision isn't exactly needed as much as far as chopping up things. You can do them the way you like them. And so, by the way, in cutting an onion, what I found is if you cut from the top of it to the root, there's less problem with a little bit of tears, especially with some of the stronger onions and scallions and shallots. So that's just another little helpful hint. And as you can see, I'm chopping through the onions one way and then slicing it quickly this way. So it's a quick way to get your onion chopped up into lovely pieces, almost bite-sized, but smaller, really. And then we'll put it in the pan to sizzle along with the butter, which has begun to sizzle. Excuse me. Aiming for the sink, and sometimes I miss. Okay, so my butter's starting to bubble. Ah, beautiful. So I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit since it was on high to get it started. And we'll let you see what that looks like. So we can then add the celery and the onion. First goes the onion. And I'm going to pick it up very carefully. It's a big onion. And carefully spread it out so it starts to cook evenly. And let's see. And by the way, somebody reminded me of this. The first thing that you really need to do when you walk into the kitchen is wash your hands very carefully with soap and water, no matter where you've been. I'm going to give this a little mix up. And you can see the yellow color, that's the butter. And this is basically a vegetarian soup with a little bit of, well, about 6 cups of chicken broth. So that when you put it in the refrigerator, and you know how when soup chills, it has the fat tends to come up to the top. Let's see if we can get back here. Where I am. All right. Okay, we're simmering in there now, so I'm going to take my celery and I'm splitting the bottom of the piece of celery. It's one big stalk, and I'm just going to chop little pieces. And we'll add that to the brew and let that saute for about 5 or 10 minutes while we cut up our green beans and our mushrooms. This is a little bit different because not everybody combines green beans and mushrooms, but it's a wonderful combination. And I have a client who absolutely adores mushrooms, and we made this the other day, and she doubled the mushroom amount. So as I say, it's up to you what you want to have in your soup, or how much of something you want to have in your soup. We're just going to spread that out a little bit and let it cook. And now we will take our green beans. I usually purchase the organic haricot vert, the little skinny green beans, which I love. And these are supposed to have all the ends trimmed and they're washed. But I do recommend that you go through them and make sure that everything is still fresh if they come in a package. And sometimes all those little stem ends are not completely cut off. So check them and then cut your green beans into about 1-inch sizes. And we will, it's about, actually for this recipe, it's about ½ a pound of green beans, which seems like a lot of green beans, but actually in the soup, by the way, makes about 2 quarts, and it's very easy to freeze it. So that if you're making it for one and you want to have some left over, unless you can eat a whole quart of soup or 2 when you're a single person at one time, I would suggest freezing it in your best glass container. And when you put it in the freezer, especially in glass, do not fill it to the top. Leave yourself at least 1 inch at the top and leave the top off the container until the soup has pretty much frozen, because it will expand. And if you put the top on the jar before it expands, you're liable to have very cracked glass in your freezer and not edible soup at that point. So there's another little hint. We're going to put the green beans here because they will go in shortly. In the meantime, in the big pot that you can see on the range, we're going to put our green beans over here. This pot, I've heated up 4 cups out of the 6, and we're going to add another 2 cups of stock to it. Actually, I'm going to add a little more beef stock. There you can see it steaming. And the reason I'm showing you this is it's another hint as far as when you're cooking something like a soup or a stew where you want it to continually cook and you don't want to stop the heat in the pan or pot. What you do is heat up your water in a kettle or whatever vessel you desire, and you take your stock, and I'm going to add about 2 teaspoons because that's equivalent to about 2 cups. So I've got a very heaping teaspoon here of my base. And in a glass measuring cup, or something that isn't plastic, please, just add your water, pour it over the spoon, because that helps clean it, and dissolve it in this water so that it dissolves evenly once you put it into the pot. And I will add that to the pot that's on the stove. So now we have 6 cups of broth, into which, there we go, we will add all the other goodies once they get sauteed first. So it's a little bit of an effort with two things, unless you have a very large skillet in which you can put everything to make the soup, because as I say, it does make about 2 quarts, which is 8 cups. So you need a very large skillet to put everything into. So now we've got the chicken stock and we've got our barley. It's raw. I haven't cooked it yet. It's pearl barley. Now, one thing that you might do to hasten this a little bit is pre-cook the barley and then rinse it so that you get all the starch off if you like before you cook it. But I want the starch in the soup because the starch gives you energy. So we're going to take that and get it ready. Our stock has come to a rolling boil, and I'm going to turn it down and let it simmer. And keep my eye on the onions and celery, and we're going to pop the mushrooms now. 2 ways to do this. First of all, when you wash your mushrooms, don't take a damp paper towel or a mushroom brush or a damp sponge and wipe them off, because mushrooms absorb, and you'll see an example of that shortly. And what I do is either break off the stem or cut it. You get more of the mushroom once you've cleaned it. And then chop it up. I'm going to cut them in half and then in thirds. And if you like, you can chop it up smaller. But that's the way we're going to do this today. And the next step will be, we will take all these wonderful mushrooms, and it's a little guy, and we will pop them into the pan and saute them first. So in the meantime, Dr. Jacalyn, do we have anybody joining us yet? I had some interesting questions yesterday. And so we used chicken stock yesterday. And today I'm using beef stock because I had made a pot of stock from lamb, which is a very different flavor, and a whole bunch of vegetables. I made my own stock, which I filtered. I strained the vegetables out, and then I put it in the refrigerator. Now, when you use either beef or any chicken or anything that has body fat, saturated fat, once you get the stock ready and you put it in the refrigerator, let the fat come up to the top. Leave it at least overnight, and you'll find that the fat comes up to the top and you can skim that off. That's just another hint to keep your fat content where you want it. All right, so we do have, interesting, let's see how much this multiplied. Oops, actually I'm going to use the 2-cup measurement because it got a lot more. And we'll see how much mushrooms we have. Oh yeah, I started out with a little bit over a cup, about 1.25 cups. And when they're cut up, we have close to 3 cups. So you can measure it either way you like. I'm going to take my sauteing celery, onions, and garlic, and I'm going to add the chicken stock. Actually, I'm going to take this and do it the other way. I think you can see this. I'm going to add this to the chicken stock. Now, you're not finished with the pan yet. So I just put that in there for the chicken stock with actually my lamb stock today. I'm going to give it a little swirl around, and I'm going to add my barley so that the barley starts to cook, because the barley will take close to 30 minutes or 40 minutes to cook. And I'm going to give that a little swirl and turn the heat up. And you want to bring this combination now with the stock and the vegetables and the barley up to a rolling boil for just a second. Turn it down, cover it, and then we'll put in a little tarragon, which is your wonderful flavoring in this. Now, the recipe actually calls for just 1/2 teaspoon of dried tarragon. However, we love the smell and the flavor of tarragon, and the aroma from the cooking is fabulous. So I'm going to measure about a tablespoon of it. And put that in. And mix it around and let that start to brew. Now you can add it later on if you want a little more tarragon flavor. And the next thing we're going to do is put in our green beans. So I'm going to switch this so you can see it. Oh, I knew I worked up muscles for something when I work out. Let me get us to there where you can actually see it. And you can see where I added the tarragon. We're going to mix that in. And now we're going to put our green beans in along with the barley. There we go. And we will cover that. We'll bring it up to a boil, but I'm going to put it back on the other burner so we can use this burner, and I'll show you what we'll do with the mushrooms. I got to keep an eye on that so when it starts to boil, we'll know. Meantime, I'm going to take another 2 tablespoons of butter, and yes, this is a lot of butter, and put this in my saucepan. And you can see it starting to bubble. The reason I didn't want you to change pans or put a new one in is because this is absolutely perfect with all the flavors from the vegetables for sauteing our mushrooms. Now mushrooms, as I said, will absorb a lot. They're like little sponges. So we're going to just roll this around in the 2 tablespoons of butter and let it saute. I turned it up a little bit. And you'll see they will get golden brown. Now if you want to use a different kind of mushrooms, I just use the white button mushrooms. You can use baby bellas, baby portobellas. You can chop up shiitake, which are a little more on the medicinal side. And I do love them, the flavor. Or you can use a number of different kinds of mushrooms, but just use at least a cup, if not more, of the mushrooms in your 2 tablespoons of butter. And we'll let those, I'm going to turn it down a little bit and let them saute. In the meantime, we've started bubbling over here with the barley, so I'm going to turn that down and cover it and let it simmer. I had some interesting questions yesterday about the barley and also about the mushrooms. So I wanted to address a couple of the technical questions about the mushrooms and the barley. The barley, of course, as I said, contains gluten, so that if you're gluten-free, if you're celiac or you have a sensitivity to gluten, and you want to use another something in place of the barley, I would suggest either, as I said, either quinoa. And quinoa cooks very quickly, so your soup would be brewed a little bit faster, and you would probably have to put the quinoa in a little later than the barley because it cooks much faster than barley. Barley usually takes anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes to cook in a boiling pot or simmering pot, and quinoa usually takes anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes. So there's your difference, and you have to figure for that when you're putting everything in the pot. You can hear that sizzling, I'm sure. The other thing I wanted to address was the idea of the mushrooms. Shiitake mushrooms, reishi mushrooms, maitake are all very medicinal. And when I use those, the shiitakes yesterday, someone asked about, do you use the stems as well as the tops of the mushrooms? And no, I don't, because the stems can sometimes have a kind of a funky flavor that you really don't want. Let me just make sure we're simmering beautifully. Okay. So again, with the mushrooms, I trim them especially the shiitake mushrooms, because you can get shiitakes small or big, doesn't matter, but do cut the stems off and then cut them up. And you can use a combination of mushrooms, because when I make my cream of mushroom soup that doesn't have any cream, I use three kinds at least. I use shiitake for sure. Sometimes I use maitake. Sometimes I use something called, I think they're called blue purum. And then there's another one. There's several different kinds of Japanese or Chinese mushrooms, different mushrooms. And mushrooms are one of the few foods that really contain a bunch of vitamin D, as in David. And they are absolutely one of my favorite foods. So what I will do often is take my mushrooms and make a meal with mushrooms. You can add anything you like, any vegetables. You can add them to almost any soup or to any, even a salad. You can do them raw. Make sure you get something like the white ones or the baby bellas to do raw, and slice them thinly into your salads. And that's perfectly wonderful. So anybody have any other questions? Okay, one other thing I'm going to add. I did not add, if you noticed, I did not add any salt. And most of the time, if you're using a commercial base, this one happens to be low sodium. So I can add some salt to my soup. But what I prefer to do is add a little bit of kosher salt, the chunky kind, and let that cook in, because very often celery and some of the other vegetables, especially things like greens, have quite a bit of salt themselves. So I don't really want to add too much, since it's also a condiment that's usually on someone's table, so they can add it as to their tastes. I'll just switch here for a second and give you a picture of how that beautiful pot looks. We'll move our mushrooms over here. And you can see how pretty this is. And it was simmering. There we go. Let's see. I forget. I need an engineer, Dr. Jacalyn. There we go. You can see how beautifully that's simmering. It's a big simmer. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit, same as with the mushrooms. And give it a good mix. It is beginning to smell divine. Now, one thing you can do, you can check on the barley. If the barley is still little, you can see some of it here at the end. That means that it's not fully cooked yet. You can probably, let me see if I can bring this up closer. There we go. It's not cooked. The barley will expand and get quite a bit bigger. So that's when you really know that it's done. I'm going to switch back again. Actually, no, I think my mushrooms are almost sauteed enough that I'm just going to add them in. Or you can wait a while if you don't want the mushrooms done as well as the rest of the soup. And by the way, the soup does cook for about 30 minutes because of the barley in it. But what I found is the green beans, which I thought might get mushy, do not. So, and I know a lot of us like our beans al dente, a little crisp. So there, we've added those. Make sure I turn my other burner off. And let's let this bring it up again so that it starts to bubble. It will in a second. And basically that's our green bean soup. So what I thought we would do today, since that will be ready in about 20 minutes, and just to show you how pretty it is when it's done, here's the finished product. I don't know if we can see it. Is that visible? We can spoon it up. As I said, it's a very thick and hearty soup. So you can certainly eat this as a meal. We did last night, and we added a salad that I made with romaine lettuce, a little bit of green cabbage, some cucumbers, and what else did we put in there? I think we had some jicama, some diced jicama. Do we have any questions there? Oh, yes, that's where you can reach me. If you desire to call or text, if you text, please put in, kitchen, Ricky's Kitch, however you want to in the text, so I know that it's referencing me and the kitchen. And it's 970-618-7607. And that'll get me on the telephone, or you can reach me at rickiskitchen.net. That's RICKISKITCHEN.net. And that's two good ways to reach me, and I will respond. And now I'm going to show you what we're going to do in addition to that. Instead of making a salad, which I did last night, I marinated a chicken breast. And of course, you can use the soup as a first course. And if you have people who are really hearty eaters and you want to serve them some chicken afterwards, here's what you do. And I haven't left the building. I have simply retrieved my chicken, and it's marinating from my refrigerator. And I will show you what happens. It's marinating in actually my favorite Dijon vinaigrette, which is actually used as a salad dressing. But what I'm also doing with it, it makes it absolutely wonderful marinade. So I did have a fork. Okay, I did have a fork. What I do with my chicken breasts, I don't know if you can see it, it's quite a big one. I'll show you in a second. Once I put them in the dish to marinate, I take my fork and I tenderize. And I'm going to turn this little guy over and do it again. And basically poking holes in it to help tenderize the meat. It's really a beautiful, quite large, it's almost a pound, actually. I think it's over a pound of chicken breast. So what I'm going to do with this little guy is grab another pan. Actually, I think I'm even going to use this pan, because what's better than having the chicken cooked in a mushroom with butter sauce? Even with vinaigrette on it. And I tell you what we'll do. We'll bring this back to the other burner. Cover it. And make sure that it's going to simmer on there. And bring this one over here. Now this time, I'm going to see how much olive oil is left in my little dish where I marinated this. And put that in the pan. So we are going to use the olive oil. Oh yeah. And let that begin to heat. As you can see, I don't like wasting things. And with all the flavors in these foods, it would certainly be a shame to waste them. And I'm going to take my little spatula and get every bit of this good stuff out of this. You can see what I'm doing. We'll go over here in a minute. Okay, it's already starting to melt. And I'm going to turn it, keep it on low for a couple of minutes while we slice up the chicken breast. And especially if you're in a hurry and you want the chicken breast to cook quickly, then I suggest slicing it. And you slice across the grain. It's almost like a flank steak and other things where you slice across the grain. So I'm going to slice our little chicken breast into almost bite-sized slices, but a little bigger. So we have a full meal brewing here. If this were something like a flank steak, I would definitely slice it on an angle, much more of a flat angle. But since this is chicken, and we can cut, about 1/4-inch slices, we can take one chicken breast and very economically, especially with the soup as a first course, if you're considering the economy and the fact that food has gone up in price, then we can take this and probably we'll definitely be able to feed 2 people, maybe even 3 or 4. Depends on how much your guests or family decide they want to eat at one sitting. And one of the things I've noticed, and I know we have guests from Europe and the Middle East, is that the portion sizes, especially in Houston, Texas, where I am, in some instances, many restaurants have such huge portion sizes that people end up taking things home in the proverbial doggy bags. Now, I'm going to give this a little swish around, and let's see what's over here. We'll switch over there so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, that is if I can get back on the spot. Where are you? My cursor decides to take off sometimes. There we go. Now, I have my chicken. And by the way, I do not use slice my chicken or any raw meats on my wooden counter because it will absorb, and I don't want it to absorb from the meat. And actually what I'm going to do, it's on low. Believe it or not, it's on low now. So we're going to put the chicken in a little bit at a time, one piece or so. Oops, we got a few here. And you can see how thinly it's sliced. And so it's going to cook very quickly. And you certainly you want your chicken to be done, chicken or turkey to be done completely before you serve it. And if you're making this ahead of time, I would suggest you can slice it up and put it in the pan before your family's ready or your guests arrive, and have it ready to saute like this, just like this. You can turn it off and leave it here, but cover it, but not for more than about 20 minutes. So it gives you almost enough time to have an hors d'oeuvre and maybe an aperitif. Okay, now it's on low, therefore it stops sizzling because we put cold chicken into the pan. So what I'm going to do now is, since I've already seasoned it with the vinaigrette dressing, and it is going to cook in the marinade, I might add a little bit more garlic, because we love garlic, so I have granulated garlic. I'll add a little of that, just a sprinkle. Here we go. And the other things that were in there, in my dressing, I happen to use either herbe de Provence or some thyme. So I'm going to add a teeny bit more thyme to the pan. So we're going to have really flavorful chicken to go along with the soup that is actually fairly bland. And I'm using about a teaspoonful of thyme. And you can see what I'm doing to spread it out evenly. And sometimes it cooperates and sometimes it doesn't. There we go. And we'll just let that start to cook. And in a couple of minutes, we will turn it over. And I have my handy little tongs to do that. So far, we have our soup brewing and we have our chicken cooking to get it ready. And we do have the green beans, so we've already got our greens. And the only thing that I would add to this as a meal would be either some sliced cucumbers or perhaps sliced tomato, and something that's not heavily dressed unless you use the same Italian type dressing that I put together for the salad as a salad dressing. It's a very simple dressing. Dr. Jacalyn, do we have time for me to make one up?
We have 7 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll show you what it looks like because I already made it up yesterday. And if you have a bottle, if you find something comes in, a condiment or something that comes in a bottle with the top like this, my suggestion is keep it. Put it through your dishwasher and use it unless you have a special salad dressing bottle, because this has the nice tiny little hole so that you can carefully use it. And so I would suggest what I use in there, I have an orange flavored olive oil, which is simply amazing, that I used with red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, the herbe de Provence, and the magic ingredient in here is Dijon mustard. And if you find that your dressing gets a little bit too vinegary or too pucker your mouth up, take about a quarter to a half a teaspoon of raw honey and mix it in, because that will help not sweeten it as much as cut the vinegar and make it a little bit more palatable. So nutritionally, it's great the way it is. I'm going to give the chicken a little flip over. And as I say, it does cook quickly. So I'm just turning it over. Actually, I'm going to use my spatula, which will get it over faster that way. Tools are important in the kitchen. And having a choice of them does make a difference. There we go. So we can get the chicken turned over all at once, and I'll show you how pretty that looks. Because it's picked up all the wonderful herbs from the sauce, as well as you can see there's some more juice in the pan from the chicken itself. Isn't that pretty? Yep, we have it where, oh gosh. The aroma is absolutely divine. Now this will be done, the chicken will be done completely in about 3 minutes. So your total time with the chicken is approximately 6 to 7 minutes. You can let it cook a little bit more if you like. And when you serve this, I would suggest putting it either individually plated, or you can put it on a plate and make sure it's use a bowl or a plate with sides, because it has plenty of its own juices and as gravy. So your meal would be this wonderful green bean soup, Austrian green bean soup with mushrooms, and we'll have the chicken ready shortly, and a green salad, and then I would top that off with either a wonderful crisp Pinot Grigio, or perhaps a something like a Sauvignon Blanc. Or if you're into reds, I would use a very light red. Not a Merlot, but something like a, well, Valpolicella is a little too heavy, but a nice light red wine, or even a rosé, a not very sweet rosé. So there's your meal, and there we have it for Ricki's Kitchen today on the United Kitchens.
Well done, Ricki. Thank you so much. It looks delicious, delectable.
It smells wonderful. I wish I could push it through the screen to you.
I do too. I would love to eat all your healthy cooking. That would be fabulous.
Mm-hmm. And it's simple. The thing that I love about the cooking that I do, for the most part, there may be more than 5 ingredients, but it's very simple combining things, and it goes together quickly in most cases. And I think that the simpler, the better, because you can actually taste the foods and discern. You can discern a little bit of what the spices are, what the herbs are, perhaps. And the tarragon, especially in this soup, is a marvelous flavor that you don't usually find in soups. So there we have it. And again, yeah, I know your book is coming out. And was it released? It was released this week. My book will be coming out, is now on Amazon. And as I say, if you want the spiral version, which enables you to flip it open and put it down so you can get to it easily when you have the recipe, you have to contact me for this one. The others are on Amazon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ricki. I'm going to spotlight you once again just to give your contact information for someone who might have just joined us.
Okay, you can reach me at rickiskitchen.net. That's RICKISKITCHEN.net. Or you can call me or text me at 970-618-7607. And thank you all for joining us, and I hope we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you, lovely Ricki. It was a pleasure, and hope you have a beautiful Mother's Day.
And happy Mother's Day to everybody. And if anybody needs me to cook, just call me.
Well, I hope you're taking a day off and treating yourself.
I have already been told that I am taking a day off.
Fabulous.
So, yes, thank you. And very happy Mother's Day to everyone out there. And enjoy wherever you are.
Fantastic. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Thank you again, Ricki.
God bless.
God bless. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you to all of you who are watching and listening and sharing the word and going over to our YouTube channel and subscribing. We truly appreciate it. We have an amazing team of people from around the world, and our goal is to provide entertainment, education, motivation, inspiration, and hope. Our next show is coming right up. It is The Listening Mentor, starring me and my special guest, Caroline Heward. So do join us for that, and we'll be back shortly. So stay wherever you are. We'll do the running and the legwork over here. Bye for now. Bye, Ricki.